I said yes to helping my coworker move on a Saturday even though I had plans. I said yes to staying late for the third time that week even though I was exhausted. I said yes to lending money I couldn't really afford to lose. I said yes to hosting Thanksgiving even though I hate hosting. I said yes to being on another committee, taking on another project, covering another shift. I said yes when I meant no, smiled when I wanted to scream, agreed when I wanted to argue, apologized when I'd done nothing wrong. I was so nice. Everyone said so. You're so nice, you're such a good person, you're so helpful, you're always there for everyone. And I'd smile and say it was nothing, really, happy to help. Meanwhile, inside, I was drowning. I was exhausted, resentful, invisible, completely lost. I couldn't remember the last time I'd done something I actually wanted to do, the last time I'd said what I actually thought, the last time I'd felt like myself instead of this perpetually accommodating ghost of a person. And the worst part? I couldn't even admit how miserable I was because nice people don't complain, nice people don't have needs, nice people are just grateful to be liked. It took me years to understand what was really happening. I wasn't being nice, I was being afraid. Afraid of conflict, afraid of disappointing people, afraid of being disliked, afraid that if people saw the real me, the one with opinions and boundaries and needs, they'd reject me. So I built this fortress of niceness, this elaborate performance of agreeableness, and I trapped myself inside it. And let me tell you something that nobody wants to hear. Being nice, the way most of us practice it, will absolutely make you miserable. Not kindness, that's different, we'll get to that. But niceness, the reflexive people-pleasing, the chronic self-abandonment, the relentless accommodation of everyone else's needs while ignoring your own, that's a recipe for a deeply unhappy life. Let's start by getting clear on what I mean by nice, because I think we've confused it with something it's not. Nice is saying you're fine when you're not fine. Nice is laughing at jokes you don't find funny. Nice is agreeing to things you don't want to do. Nice is hiding your real opinions to avoid ruffling feathers. Nice is making yourself smaller so other people can feel bigger. Nice is prioritizing other people's comfort over your own honesty. Nice is a performance, a mask, a strategy for managing other people's reactions to you. And here's the thing, it works in the short term. People do like you when you're nice. They find you easy, pleasant, low maintenance. But they're not actually liking you, they're liking the version of you that never challenges them, never needs anything, never disrupts their comfort. They're liking a lie. I remember this moment with devastating clarity. I was having coffee with someone I'd considered a close friend for years, and she was telling me about some drama in her life, and I was doing my usual thing, nodding sympathetically, offering supportive comments, being the good listener I always was. And then she said something, just an offhand comment, but it was racist, casually but unmistakably racist. And I felt it, that familiar fork in the road. I could say something, could call it out, could be honest about how that comment made me feel. Or I could let it slide, could stay nice, could keep the peace. And I stayed nice. I didn't say a word. Just kept nodding, kept the conversation moving, swallowed my discomfort like I'd swallowed 1,000 other moments of discomfort. And as I drove home that day, I felt this wave of self-loathing so intense I had to pull over. Because in choosing to be nice, I'd betrayed myself. I'd chosen her comfort over my integrity. I'd valued her approval more than my own self-respect. And the friendship felt worthless after that, because what's the point of being close to someone who doesn't actually know you, who you can't be honest with? That's what niceness costs you. It costs you your integrity. Every time you say yes when you mean no, every time you smile through something that bothers you, every time you pretend to agree when you don't, you're chipping away at your own sense of self. You're teaching yourself that your real thoughts and feelings and needs don't matter, that they're inconvenient, that they should be hidden and managed and suppressed. And you can't do that indefinitely without consequences. The resentment builds, slowly at first, then faster. You start feeling angry at people for taking advantage of you, even though you never told them where your boundaries were. You feel exhausted by relationships that should energize you. You feel invisible, unappreciated, used. And the cruel irony is that you did this to yourself. You trained people to treat you this way by consistently showing them that your needs were negotiable, that your boundaries were porous, that you'd always prioritize their comfort over your own well-being. Let me tell you about the nice person's cycle, because it's insidious. You say yes to something you don't want to do because you want to be liked, you want to be helpful, you don't want to let anyone down. You do the thing, but you do it with building resentment because you didn't actually want to do it. The resentment leaks out in passive-aggressive ways, in sighs and martyr energy and subtle digs. The other person senses something's off but doesn't know what because you said yes, you said it was fine, you never communicated that it wasn't actually fine. So the relationship gets this weird tension, this unspoken conflict. And then you feel guilty for being resentful, because after all, no one forced you, you volunteered. So you overcompensate by being even nicer, saying yes to even more things you don't want to do, and the cycle intensifies. You're caught in this trap of your own making, and the only way out is the one thing you're most afraid of. Honesty. Boundaries. Saying no. Here's something that took me way too long to understand. Nice people don't actually have better relationships than honest people. We think we do, we think all that accommodation and agreeableness is building connection, but it's not. It's building a house of cards. Because relationships built on one person's constant self-sacrifice aren't sustainable. Eventually, you run out of things to give. Eventually, the resentment becomes too big to hide. Eventually, you snap, or burn out, or just disappear because you can't keep up the performance anymore. And the other person is blindsided because from their perspective, everything was fine. You never said anything was wrong. They had no idea you were suffering because you worked so hard to make sure they never had to see it. Compare that to relationships built on honesty. Yes, there's more conflict. Yes, there are uncomfortable conversations. Yes, sometimes people get upset when you set a boundary or disagree with them. But those relationships are real. They're built on people actually knowing each other, seeing each other, accepting each other as they are rather than as they pretend to be. And that foundation, that realness, can weather storms that would shatter the fragile construction of niceness. I want to talk about something that makes people really uncomfortable. Being nice is often a form of manipulation. I know that sounds harsh, but hear me out. When you're being nice, when you're constantly accommodating and agreeable and helpful, what are you hoping to get in return? Usually, you're hoping to be liked, to be valued, to avoid rejection or conflict. You're managing other people's perceptions of you. You're trying to control how they feel about you by controlling your behavior. That's manipulation. It might be unconscious, it might be well-intentioned, but it's still using niceness as a strategy to get something you want, which is approval and belonging. And the problem with that strategy is that it's exhausting to maintain, and it attracts exactly the wrong kind of people. Think about who gravitates toward chronically nice people. Users, takers, people with weak boundaries themselves who are happy to let you do all the emotional labor in the relationship. People who want someone who won't challenge them, who won't call them on their behavior, who will always be available and accommodating. Meanwhile, healthy people, people with good boundaries, they often find chronically nice people frustrating or even untrustworthy. Because they can sense the performance, they can tell you're not being genuine, and they don't know how to have a real relationship with someone who won't be honest about what they actually think and feel and need. Let me tell you about my friend Sarah, because she's the person who helped me see all this. Sarah is not nice. She's kind, deeply kind, but she's not nice. She'll tell you if she can't make it to your event. She'll disagree with you if she thinks you're wrong. She'll call you out if you're being unfair. She'll say no without apology when something doesn't work for her. And at first, I found her a little bit scary, because I was so conditioned to equate niceness with goodness that her directness felt harsh. But here's what I noticed. Sarah's relationships are rock solid. People trust her because they know she means what she says. When she says yes, it's a real yes. When she shows up, it's because she wants to be there. When she gives you advice or support, it's genuine, not performative. She has conflicts with people, sure, but she works through them directly instead of letting resentment fester. And she's one of the happiest people I know, because she's not carrying the crushing weight of a false self. That's the difference between kindness and niceness that I wish I'd understood earlier. Kindness is about genuine care and compassion. It's about treating people with respect and consideration. But it doesn't require you to abandon yourself. You can be kind and still have boundaries. You can be kind and still disagree. You can be kind and still say no. You can be kind and still be honest about things that are bothering you. Niceness, on the other hand, requires constant self-abandonment. It requires you to put everyone else's needs and feelings ahead of your own, to smooth over every potential conflict, to never be an inconvenience. And that's not sustainable, it's not healthy, and it's not actually good for your relationships. Here's another uncomfortable truth about niceness. It's often rooted in a fundamental disrespect for other people. Stay with me on this. When you're being nice instead of honest, you're essentially deciding that other people can't handle the truth. You're assuming they're so fragile that they need you to manage their emotions by hiding your real reactions. You're not trusting them to be adults who can hear disagreement or disappointment or honest feedback and handle it maturely. You're infantilizing them, treating them like they need to be protected from reality. And simultaneously, you're inflating your own importance, acting like their entire emotional state depends on your constant accommodation. That's not respect, that's a weird kind of arrogance disguised as selflessness. I think about this with conflict avoidance especially. Nice people will twist themselves into pretzels to avoid conflict, convincing themselves they're being mature, being the bigger person. But often, they're actually being cowardly and condescending. They're too afraid of the discomfort of conflict to have an honest conversation, and they're assuming the other person is too fragile or unreasonable to work through a disagreement productively. Meanwhile, the issues never get resolved, the resentment builds, and the relationship slowly dies from 1,000 unspoken tensions. That's not kindness, that's just conflict avoidance dressed up as virtue. Let me get really specific about what niceness looks like in practice and why it's so destructive. Nice people apologize constantly, even when they've done nothing wrong. Sorry for bothering you, sorry for taking up space, sorry for existing in a way that might inconvenience you. Every apology that isn't warranted is a small betrayal of yourself, a message that you don't have the right to exist without constantly prostrating yourself. Nice people can't accept compliments, they deflect and minimize because accepting praise would mean taking up space, would mean acknowledging their worth, and nice people aren't allowed to do that. Nice people volunteer for everything, not because they want to, but because they can't bear the thought of someone being disappointed in them or thinking they're not helpful. Nice people never ask for help, because asking for help means admitting you have needs, and nice people aren't supposed to have needs. They're supposed to be the helpers, the supporters, the ones everyone else leans on. Except you can't have genuine relationships if they only flow one direction. Friendship, love, connection, these require reciprocity. They require vulnerability, which means sometimes being the one who needs support. But nice people have such fragile self-worth that they believe the only reason people tolerate them is because they're useful. Stop being useful, start having needs, and surely people will abandon you. So they never test that hypothesis, never risk actually being vulnerable, and they condemn themselves to relationships that are fundamentally unequal and unsatisfying. Here's what happened to me when I started trying to be less nice and more honest. People got upset. Not everyone, but some people definitely did. The ones who'd gotten used to my endless accommodation, who'd never had to consider my needs because I never asserted them, they didn't like the change. Some of them pushed back, tried to make me feel guilty, accused me of being selfish or difficult or not the person they thought I was. And those moments were absolutely brutal because they confirmed my worst fear, that people only liked me for what I did for them, not for who I was. But here's the thing. Those relationships needed to end or transform. They were built on an unsustainable foundation, and perpetuating them would have meant perpetuating my own misery. So yes, I lost some people. And it hurt. But I also discovered which relationships were real, which people actually cared about me as a whole person, not just as a source of convenient support. And you know what else happened? New people started showing up in my life. People who were drawn to authenticity rather than agreeableness. People who wanted actual connection rather than a one-sided support system. My relationships got deeper, more reciprocal, more satisfying. Because I was finally bringing my whole self instead of just the accommodating parts. I was finally worth knowing because there was actually someone there to know. But I'm not going to pretend this transition was easy or that it's over. Breaking the nice person habit is incredibly hard because it's not just about behavior, it's about rewiring fundamental beliefs about your worth and your right to take up space in the world. It means sitting with the discomfort of people being disappointed in you or upset with you. It means tolerating conflict instead of immediately scrambling to smooth it over. It means trusting that you're valuable even when you're not being useful. It means believing that your needs and feelings and opinions matter as much as anyone else's, which for people who've spent their lives being nice, is a radical and terrifying proposition. I still catch myself doing it. Someone asks me to do something and my mouth opens to say yes before my brain has even processed whether I want to do it. Someone's upset and I immediately start trying to fix it, manage their emotions, make it better. Someone disagrees with me and I feel this pull to back down, to avoid the conflict, to just agree. The nice person patterns are deep, and they activate especially strongly when I'm tired or stressed or feel vulnerable. But now at least I notice it happening. Now I can pause, can check in with myself, can make a conscious choice about whether I want to accommodate this time or whether I need to be honest. And here's something interesting I've learned. Being honest, setting boundaries, saying no, these things get easier with practice. The first time I told someone I couldn't help them with something, I felt like I was committing murder. My heart was pounding, my hands were shaking, I was sure they'd hate me forever. But they just said okay and asked someone else. And the world didn't end. The relationship didn't implode. I survived someone being mildly disappointed in me. And the next time was slightly less terrifying. And the time after that was almost normal. You build the muscle of honesty the same way you build any muscle, through repeated use, through pushing against resistance, through surviving the discomfort until it becomes familiar. Let me talk about what it's like to live in a body that's been trained to be nice, because I think this is important and not discussed enough. When you spend years prioritizing other people's needs and suppressing your own, your body keeps the score. You lose touch with what you actually feel, what you actually want. Someone asks you what you want for dinner and you genuinely don't know because you've spent so long just going along with what everyone else wants that you can't access your own preferences anymore. You feel anxious constantly but you can't pinpoint why because you've ignored your own discomfort for so long that you don't recognize the signals anymore. You feel exhausted for no clear reason because you're carrying the weight of everyone else's emotions plus the weight of your own suppressed emotions. Your body is trying to tell you something's wrong, is trying to protect you by sending alarm signals, but you've learned to override those signals in service of being nice. So the signals get louder. Headaches, digestive issues, insomnia, mysterious pains, anxiety attacks. Your body is screaming what your mouth won't say. And you can keep ignoring it, keep pushing through, keep being nice while your health deteriorates. Or you can start listening, start honoring what your body is trying to tell you about boundaries and needs and the unsustainability of your current approach to relationships. Here's another dimension of this that really gets me. Nice people often pride themselves on their empathy, their sensitivity to other people's feelings. And yes, they're often very attuned to other people's emotions. But it's a specific kind of attunement. It's about sensing what other people need so you can provide it, sensing when they're upset so you can fix it, sensing potential conflict so you can avoid it. It's not actually about understanding people as complex individuals, it's about managing them as potential sources of approval or rejection. Real empathy includes the ability to let people feel their feelings without immediately trying to rescue them from discomfort. Real empathy includes respecting people enough to be honest with them even when honesty creates temporary upset. Real empathy includes the understanding that sometimes the kindest thing you can do is set a boundary or speak a hard truth, even if it makes someone uncomfortable in the moment. I want to talk about nice people and anger, because this is a big one. Nice people don't get angry, right? They're understanding, forgiving, endlessly patient. Except humans get angry. It's a natural emotion that arises when your boundaries are violated or you're treated unfairly. So what happens to the anger that nice people aren't allowed to feel? It doesn't disappear, it goes underground. It becomes passive aggression, snippy comments, the silent treatment, sudden coldness that seems to come from nowhere. It becomes depression, which is often anger turned inward. It becomes psychosomatic illness. It leaks out in ways that are ultimately more destructive than just expressing anger directly would have been. I remember the first time I let myself actually express anger instead of immediately suppressing it in favor of being nice. A friend had canceled on me for the third time with barely any notice, and instead of saying, "No problem, totally understand," like I normally would have, I said, "Actually, I'm frustrated. This is the third time, and it feels like you don't value my time." My voice was shaking, I felt like I was being the worst person in the world. But I said it. And she apologized, actually apologized instead of making excuses. And we had a real conversation about patterns and consideration and what we needed from each other. And the friendship got better, not worse. Because we were finally being real with each other instead of me just absorbing every disappointment with a nice person smile. Let's talk about nice people and success, because there's an interesting dynamic here. Nice people often don't advocate for themselves in professional settings. They don't ask for raises or promotions because that would be pushy. They don't take credit for their work because that would be bragging. They say yes to extra projects without negotiating for extra compensation because they want to be team players. They don't push back on unreasonable deadlines or unfair treatment because they don't want to be difficult. And then they watch less competent but more assertive people get ahead while they stay stuck, getting more responsibilities without corresponding advancement or recognition. And they tell themselves that's fine, they're not motivated by status or money, they just want to do good work and be liked. But underneath, there's resentment and bitterness and a sense of being taken advantage of. Because being nice in professional settings often means being exploited, and there's only so long you can tell yourself you're above caring about fair treatment before the cognitive dissonance becomes unbearable. Here's what I wish someone had told me 20 years ago. Being liked is not the same as being valued. Being liked is not the same as being respected. Being liked is not the same as being genuinely known and cared for. You can be universally liked and profoundly lonely because no one actually knows the real you. You can be everyone's favorite helper and have no one show up when you need help because the relationship was never reciprocal. You can be the nicest person in every room and still be miserable because you've sacrificed authenticity for approval, and approval without authenticity is hollow. What you actually want, what we all actually want, is to be seen and valued for who we really are, messy parts and all. To have relationships where you can be honest, where you can have needs, where you can disagree without the relationship imploding. Where your yes means yes and your no means no and people trust you because you mean what you say. Where you don't have to perform or manage or suppress yourself to maintain connection. That's what genuine intimacy looks like, and niceness is actually an obstacle to it, not a path toward it. I think about the people in my life now, the relationships that feel most nourishing and real, and not one of them is based on me being endlessly nice and accommodating. They're based on mutual respect, honesty, reciprocity. We challenge each other, we tell each other hard truths, we set boundaries, we occasionally disappoint each other. And the relationships are stronger for it, not weaker. Because we trust each other enough to be real, and that trust creates safety that niceness never could. So if you recognize yourself in this, if you've spent years being the nice one and you're exhausted and resentful and lost, I want you to know it's not too late to change. It won't be comfortable, people will resist, you'll feel guilty and selfish and wrong, because you're going against years of conditioning. But on the other side of that discomfort is freedom. The freedom to be yourself, to have opinions, to take up space, to have needs, to be a whole complex human being instead of a cardboard cutout of endless accommodation. Start small. Say no to one thing you don't want to do. Voice one opinion you'd normally keep to yourself. Set one boundary. Notice how it feels, notice that you survive it, notice that the world doesn't end. And then do it again. And again. Build the muscle of authenticity, of honesty, of self-respect. Stop abandoning yourself in pursuit of approval from people who don't even really know you. Stop performing niceness and start practicing kindness, which includes kindness to yourself, which includes honoring your own needs and boundaries and worth. Because here's the truth that niceness tries to hide from you. You don't have to earn your right to exist, to have needs, to take up space. You don't have to be endlessly useful and accommodating and self-sacrificing to be worthy of love and connection. You're allowed to be a whole person, with preferences and boundaries and needs and moods and opinions. You're allowed to prioritize yourself sometimes. You're allowed to disappoint people. You're allowed to be honest even when honesty creates discomfort. You're allowed to be human instead of nice. And the people who can't handle that, who need you to stay small and accommodating and endlessly available, those aren't your people. Let them go. Make space for relationships that can hold all of you, not just the parts that are easy and convenient and pleasant. Make space for the messy, complicated, real version of connection that comes from two whole people showing up honestly instead of one person performing and the other person consuming. Being nice made me miserable for years before I understood why. It cost me my sense of self, my integrity, my health, my time, my energy, and ultimately, it didn't even get me what I was hoping for, which was genuine connection and belonging. What finally brought those things was the terrifying, liberating choice to stop being nice and start being real. To value authenticity over approval, boundaries over accommodation, honesty over performance. It's not always comfortable, it's not always popular, but it's mine. My real life, with my real self, having real relationships. And I wouldn't trade that for all the nice person gold stars in the world.